Hi folks, Joseph Kursky here. It's time for my annual What Were My Favorite Books from All of Last Year video. I can't believe a whole year has gone by since my last one, but this year, 2025, I read 84 books. 84 books. Fiction, nonfiction, music, biographies, spirituality, mysteries, travel, adventure, much more. 84 books. Here are my favorite books each month, and also at the end, my 3 favorite books for the entire year 2025. I'm also interested in finding out what you read that brought you joy, satisfaction, learning, etc. in the past year. In January, my favorite book was The Last Man Who Knew Everything, Dan Schwartz, about Enrico Fermi, the nuclear physicist. One of the interesting moments in that book is they had a controlled nuclear reaction going on in 1942-ish under the University of Chicago's soccer field. Fortunately, it was a controlled reaction. You know what I'm saying? It's just interesting, these hinge points of history where something could have gone incredibly wrong. The Last Man Who Knew Everything. Very interesting book. February, I actually read 2 of my favorite books of the year, more to come in a moment. The Old Ways by Robert Macfarlane, naturalist. He talks about his hikes off the coast of Essex and in the Scottish Highlands and in other places around the world. Absolutely fascinating, The Old Ways, Robert Macfarlane. As you know, I'm very tenacious about walking, so I loved that book and his attention to detail of people and the landscapes that he encountered. I also checked out on Interlibrary Loan, because it's out of print, The Year-Long Day. If you can get that on Interlibrary Loan, I highly recommend. Ivar Rudd, R-U-D-D, Rudd. It's about a guy that goes up to Svalbard, north of Norway, and his encounters with seals, polar bears, a 6-month-long nighttime, and so on. Why would a person do that? The Year-Long Day, the title indicating that it was 6 months of daylight, 6 months of nighttime. In March, I was very surprised by this book, Keith Richards' life book. Title is Life, his autobiography. He's actually doing what I would love other music biographers and autobiographers to do, and that is pay more attention to the music. Keith goes on for pages and pages. Actually, I listened to it on audio because I wanted to listen to his and other cool accents in that book. But he goes on and on about alternative tunings, man, about my guitar, etc. So I really loved his attention to music. Keith Richards' Life. That was in March. April, I reread David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, one of my favorite authors. You know, I'm wearing my map tie. Dickens loved to get out there on the landscape. He loved walking. He would walk all night long in London, etc. David Copperfield wasn't my favorite Dickens book, but I thought I'd better read that because it's been a while. And then I also read The Finest Hours by Michael Tougias, Tougias. I read several by Michael this year about rescues at sea and elsewhere, and they're fascinating. True stories, and he's got a great way of telling those stories. In May, I reread The 1 in a Million Boy by Monica Wood. That's a really curious, fascinating, heartwarming, slightly disturbing, but wonderful book, The 1 in a Million Boy, Monica Wood. In June, I read 8 books, including The 6 Conversations by Heather Holleman. Holleman? From Pennsylvania State University, Penn State. And I also read a very disturbing but important book, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne, B-O-Y-N-E. Oh my gosh, I'm still reeling from that book. Enough said. Read that book. I think it's an important book to read. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. So I read 6 books in January, 6 in February, 7 in March, 5 in April, 6 in May, and 8 in June. Let's continue with the last half of the year now. In July, I read 7 books, including another Robert Macfarlane book, which I actually use snippets of in the courses that I teach, the GIS courses that I teach, about nature's rights. And this one was called Is a River Alive? Is a River Alive? Robert Macfarlane. He goes to a cloud forest in Ecuador. He goes to the boreal forest in Quebec, etc. But it's all about the rights of nature. Is a river alive? I also read Who Was Annie Oakley? I didn't really know much about Annie Oakley by Stephanie Spinner. I loved that book. In August, I read one of my favorite books of the year, Connecting Dots by Josh Miele, all about how he went blind and then he loved 3D maps of the University of California, Berkeley campus, and he loved raised relief maps. There's lots of mapping, spatial thinking connections, and just how he navigates his environment and his work at various labs and at Amazon and other places, Microsoft, not Amazon. Anyway, the point is, that's a great book, Connecting Dots. And I actually wrote to the author, and he wrote me back, which was a huge honor. I also, in August, read Dion's book, autobiography, The Rock and Roll Philosopher, Dion DiMucci. I loved that book. Lots of photos and memories, but also his philosophy on life, which is very, very wonderful to read. In September, I read 6 books, Dog Days by John Katz, Jonkatz, about his farm in New England and his cow, Elvis, that is so affectionate. He's always slobbering John with his big tongue. And, of course, about his dogs and his sheep and other animals that he lovingly and caringly cares for. I also read History Matters from David McCullough. Now, David passed away a couple years ago, but his daughter went through his writing shed that he wrote in, and he wrote all of his books with 4 fingers, 2 on each hand, on a 1941 Royal typewriter. All of his books, including 1776 and his other big tomes. Amazing. I didn't know that until I read History Matters. So it's his daughter finding commencement speeches and other things that he's written and spoken about. History Matters, David McCullough. So David, even after he's passed away, he's imparting his wisdom. I took notes on that book. I loved it so much. In October, I read 8 books. They Saved the Stallions by Deborah Hopkinson, in part because I'd actually gone to the Vienna Spanish Writing School this past year in Vienna, Austria. And that's a fascinating story about their rescue of those horses in World War II. Right at the end of World War II. It's amazing, an amazing true story. Also, John Gradvall's The Story of ABBA. You know, I'm a huge ABBA fan. I've got videos about ABBA on this channel. That was a great book. I learned some things that I actually didn't know before. In November, I read 10 books. Teaching Spatially with GIS, that's my own book that I actually sent to a publisher this past year. I had to read it several times. So that's one of the books I read, Teaching Spatially with GIS. Look for that one. I also read another William Kent Kruger book, Tamarack County. I think I read about 3 Kruger books. They're all quite wonderful intertwinings of history, geography, landscape, people, events. And I also read A Freaky Field Trip by Matt Lake. It's like Atlas Obscura. It's like roadside geology, quirky Americana stuff that the author finds, including a museum in Louisiana that I didn't know about that I'll have to visit. A Freaky Field Trip. In December, I read 7 books, including P.T. Barnum, a book about P.T. Barnum. I learned some things that I didn't know before. He didn't go into circuses until he was 60 years old. He did museums and other things before that. By Fleming, Candace Fleming. And I also I love listening to these, especially because of the accents and just the way that the narrator does all the men's and the women's voices. Richard Osman. I read a couple of Richard Osman books about the Thursday Murder Club and these 70-year-olds that solve crimes. Okay, my favorite 3 books. I'm going to read them in reverse order, list them in reverse order. Number 3, The Old Ways, Robert Macfarlane, about his treks around the planet. Robert Macfarlane, naturalist, The Old Ways. You know, I'm a GIS person, right? I love technology, but there's something about using all your senses and understanding the landscape with these senses right here. And my second favorite book number 2, was The Year-Long Day, the one about the person going up and living in Svalbard for a year, Ivan Rudd, R-U-D-D. Thanks to the public library. Yay! I got that on interlibrary loan for free. Love the public library. Are you visiting your public library? I hope so. And my all-time favorite book for this past year, 2025, was, wait for it, It was History Matters. You knew I was going to say that because I mentioned that I took notes on that book. History Matters, David McCullough. There are just such gems in there, the way he phrases things. And it's not just history. It's encouragement, it's geography, it's paying attention to details, it's affirming others. It's so wonderful. But a runner-up, though, was The Six Conversations by Heather Holman. And those are my favorite books for 2025. I'm interested to find out what you read this past year. Send me a note, make a comment on this video. Keep reading, keep asking questions, keep wondering about our fascinating planet and the people that live on it. And thanks for being there.